Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Queer YA Sci-Fi Fantasy panel. I'm really happy that this is actually a part 2 to an earlier series, basically, that I've been doing. So I'm really happy that people continually humor me by agreeing to do these, and that I'm able to fulfill panels that make my heart so happy. Just a general bio about me, and then I will let the authors talk about themselves and the books as well. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and I will remember, hopefully, to go back. Just drop them whenever you want, and I will go back to them. So basically, if you don't know who I am, I'm Lily, and I am just the person behind Utopia State of Mind on the internet in a variety of different places. So I'll have the authors introduce themselves. Adrienne, do you want to start?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lily, for having me and all of us here. Love queer SFF panels so much and always appreciate being guest. My name is Adrienne Tooley. I am the author of Sweet and Bitter Magic, Sophie and the Bone Song, and the forthcoming The Third Daughter. This book is not out yet, so I have not perfected my pitch, but essentially, this book is about a queendom where a centuries-old prophecy has finally been fulfilled, and their deity, the new maiden, has been reborn as the third daughter of a third daughter, conveniently of the queen. Unfortunately, this means that the church will be taking over the crown, and the eldest princess does not want to give up her family line for a vaguely corrupt church. And so what she does is she finds a sleeping potion to put her youngest sister to sleep so she could reclaim the crown. But unfortunately for her, the apothecary whom she purchased the potion from mixed up the vials, sending her away with a vial of her magical tears instead. Her youngest sister falls into an unwakeable sleep, and the two girls must work together to reawaken the queen before losing control of the throne and the country for good. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Emily?
That was a very good pitch for just off the cuff. Okay, my name is Emily Victoria. My first novel was This Golden Flame, and my second book, As Silver in the Mist, just came out in November. Despite having golden in the title and this one having silver, they are actually both standalones. So this one is set in a world of dying magic, and basically the country that the main character Devlin lives in is slowly being taken over by this malevolent magical force called the Mists. She's a spy, so she is sent across the border to try to kidnap the strongest magical caster who still lives. But then, of course, things go wrong. So yeah, that is Silver in the Mist.
So, hi everyone, I am Alicia Dow. I am so happy to be here. I love these panels. Thank you, Lily, for having me. And I'm a huge fan of all these authors. Hi. I wrote, hold on, and I have them all around me. So it's going to be like, get it together, Alicia. Okay, I wrote The Sound of Stars, The Kindred, A Song of Salvation, which is coming out in July, Just a Pinch of Magic, which is coming out in October, The Cookie Crumbles, which I co-authored with Tracy Badua, All's Fairy, which is coming out in 2025. A few short stories. I think that's it. Yeah, for now, we'll see. A Song of Salvation, which is coming out in July, is about a reincarnated god and a space kind of adventurer from the Alluri, which I've, introduced in The Sound of Stars, and also a space DJ. See, I just made it up. Mine off the cusp does not sound as good as Adrian's. So, it's a wild trip. It's a space opera. It is queer. It is fun. It is my first spacey space opera. So, and it rounds out the entire The Sound of Stars and The Kindred. If it were a trilogy, that's the end of the trilogy.
So I also, I'm Kayla Faye. I also wrote a reincarnated God book. Not nearly as impressive as my very first book. So, but first and foremost, Lily, thank you so much for having us. I'm thrilled to be invited and I'm really happy to be here. And I wrote Raven Song, which is also the story of a reincarnated war god. In this lifetime, her name is Neve, and she and her three sisters are tasked with protecting the world from what is essentially a hellmouth. And Neve loves her duty, loves her family, loves what she's doing, not so keen on high school. And so naturally, there's a new girl, and for the first time, Neve thinks, "Oh, maybe this humanity thing isn't so bad. Also, she's cute." And so it's kind of figuring out Neve figuring out her place in the world, and then obviously the new girl, Alexandria, has kind of like secrets and problems of her own. So it's them kind of figuring that out together. But yeah, no, it's my very first book, and I'm really proud of it. And yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. I've obviously also all read these books, and they're so fabulous. I love pairing them all together. There are so many different questions. We've already touched upon it, right? Reincarnated gods that have so many like little kind of echoes of conversations that I feel like people are starting and sort of contributing to. So this was so fun for me to make. My first question is going to be about the theme of our panel, so queer YA sci-fi fantasy. And I want to know, how do you think queer rep in literature, specifically YA, has evolved throughout your careers as writers and or experiences as readers? So for both, what conversations do you think should be talked about more? So I'm going to call on the first person to answer my questions, and then everyone else should just feel free to answer whenever you want. But Adrian, hot seat.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest change that I've seen starting as a reader, moving into a writer, even from my first book was sold in 2018, published in 2021. The biggest difference is that there's more. There's more of it, which is so phenomenal, and I think instrumental to literature as a whole, to queerness as a whole, to making it accessible, making it digestible, understandable. One of the things that I love about writing queerness in fantasy is that it doesn't have to be this hot topic all the time. It can just be a part of a world that you build that exists. But I think yeah, ultimately, like what I've seen is there's more of it. People are hungry for it. Readers are hungry for it. Writers are able to tell their stories, some of them for the very first time. Um, and that's all super positive. I think that the conversations that we definitely still need to have is in terms of diversity, and making sure that all queer identities are represented, that we are making seats at the table for all of those writers to contribute, and that we're not focusing on kind of like one slim definition of like what's acceptable queerness, what's publishable queerness, what's comfortable queerness for readers, for sellers, for publishers. So I think that's kind of where I hope we continue that chat.
Yeah, I haven't noticed it like that much as a writer just because I haven't been a writer that long, but like as a reader, I've definitely noticed it. Like when I was a teen and actually reading young adult books, I don't think there was like any ace books there, and now there's like there's multiple ace writers, there's multiple queer writers, so that's the biggest change I've noticed. It just makes me so happy because I actually walk very close to 2 high schools, and I just love like knowing that those teens get to have all those books that I didn't necessarily get to have. So that always warms my heart.
I would say like the door has opened a little and we're starting to squeeze through, but we haven't yet sat at the table really yet. Like maybe there's 2 or 3 of us at the table. We can get a few more seats. It did not exist when I was a kid. I did not have any real examples of queer rep in sci-fi, and especially Black and fat and neurodiverse. Like that was like unheard of when I was a kid. Now it's like you're getting more, but I think there should be even more. So I'm really just looking forward to how many more people can, get in. And if I can ever help someone get in there, I wouldn't say that I'm in a place where I could be like, let's do it. But I really want to support as many authors that are trying to break in, and especially in sci-fi, because sci-fi is having it has a bit of an identity crisis, I would say, especially right now. We love it, but I think fantasy is a little more approachable, but for sci-fi, it's been very narrow, and there's only been a few breakouts, and everybody will either tell you it's dead or it's dying or nobody's doing it, and then you have to be like, wait a minute, I exist. I'm here, I'm doing this. So I think in a few years, maybe publishing will understand that sci-fi is probably one of the biggest genres that is being consumed in media. And I hope that they're going to start being a little more open and accessible about it. But I think with fantasy, I think there's still more place for it to grow as well. I'm very excited to see what the future holds.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think I also obviously haven't been a writer for very long, and am debuting with something queer, and plan on continuing writing queer stuff for as long as they keep buying it from me. But that kind of is the issue, that, like, isn't it? You know, like I have to make those kind of adjustments, and think about being palatable, quote unquote, even though there are so many more queer books, and it's starting to expand, right? We're starting to see books that, and I count myself among them, where uh, the main characters are queer. They end up together. Like, that's the main kind of like love situation, but it's not. It's an element of the story, but it is not a message, or it's not it doesn't, like, it's not part of like the politics of the story, insofar as being queer is like inherently political anyway. But it is not kind of a, like, I'm not writing a like queer power girl thing book. It's just like a story, and they happen to also be queer. And so for me, I didn't really want it to be like that, to be the main crux of the story. It is a huge part of it, and it does inform almost everything, because of course it does. I'm queer, I wrote it. But I still think I agree with what everyone says. There's so much more than there used to be, but especially with non-cis white queer stuff, there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm really excited to see that work get done. And I hope it will go faster than I think it will, but I think there's a lot of progress to be made still.
I want to talk a little bit. I think that's a good segue. I want to talk a little bit about queerness in the fantasy worlds, in the sci-fi worlds, and how it interacts with that specific, like, in the world building way, for your books. And then also, for those who have not read the books yet, if you could do a little bit of a background about, queerness, acceptedness. Wait, that's not a word. Acceptance. And openness of queerness in your worlds, that would be great as well. Emily, do you want to start this one?
Absolutely. So yeah, again, my world kind of has that dying magic, and it is a very queer normative world. People just, always just use the proper pronouns. All different identities are accepted. One interesting challenge writing it, though, is it is sort of set, in the olden day times. And like nowadays, we're starting to get, non-gendered language, like non-binary language, but that doesn't really exist back then. So to try to like find, for example, I didn't want to use Lord and Lady. I wanted to find like non-gendered Tom, but there has never really existed a non-gendered Tom for a Lord and Lady. So like I ended up using Lade, which is kind of like, I think, based on Scottish or something. But there were some of those interesting things because, back then you didn't like have that. So it's kind of interesting, like taking some of the ideas from today and trying to make like the past more inclusive.
I think it's me now. Right? I just kind of do whatever I want, and I wait to see if anybody says no. And so far that's my approach to life. But in my stories as well, where I just kind of like, I will write a character and be like, no, that's just how they are. And for the most part, no one has said anything to me yet. And it's been really cool. My editors have always kind of just gone, all right, Elise, like, let's just let her be. No, like, if I'm making up the world, I'm just gonna make it however I want it to be. I don't need to like adhere to any kind of rules about the world we live in. I can just do whatever I want. And so that's been the case, because if I don't write stories where the identity is the story. That's just like Kayla said, it's really just kind of, that's who they are and this is what they're doing. And I think that's been really a great way to just tell the story, and then everybody's accepted, and I don't have to deal with any of the issues that I don't like of our world. So it's really a take what I like and throw away the rest approach.
So with my book, it's contemporary fantasy, so it has these fantasy elements, but it is very much set in a small town in coastal Massachusetts. I grew up in Rhode Island, so I'm intimately familiar with just like that kind of small town. And so for me, I wanted to walk a line where in the fantasy elements, no issue. Neve is gay, her sisters are gay, their guardians, two of them are like married, and there's like a really lovely kind of relationship there. They have three nuns who are their guardians, who are their essentially mothers, and two of them are married. Spoilers, I guess, mini spoilers. Sorry. But when you're kind of in high school, it's in the high school setting, it's not ever an issue. I have a non-binary character and no one ever misgenders them on purpose. It's never an issue, but there is an instance where like a bully is about to use a homophobic slur before he kind of gets his shit rocked a little bit. And so it's like, for me, I wanted the, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, I apologize. So I wanted kind of the acknowledgement that this is still like the real world, the modern world. Homophobia does exist, but I wanted it to be not toothless, but I wanted it to be punished immediately, where it's just like, this is a real thing that I experienced, that a lot of people in my peer group experienced, especially in high school, by like this type of person. And these are the consequences in novel and hopefully out of novel. And so that's sort of how I managed to balance that. But I also wanted to walk the line where I wasn't ever going to have the only named trans character get misgendered as a way to hurt them. You know, like I didn't want to, in trying to be like realistic, cause harm or alienate my readers or do anything like that. Also, as a non-binary person who has been misgendered, to hurt them, like that sucks. And I don't want it. And like at the end of the day, like I'm writing for kids and I'm trying to create like a space where they can see themselves and feel safe and kind of all of those things. So I tried to thread that needle, hopefully successfully.
Something that I've been very conscious and intentional about in my work is building worlds where homophobia doesn't exist, because kind of like Alicia said, frankly, I don't want to deal with it and I'm in control. And so I can do what I want. And you know, in the world of the third daughter, like I also tried to sort of normalize unconventional relationships as a whole. The queen has 4 children, every single one of them has a different father. She was about the people she loved in the moment versus like the institution of marriage. So like Elodie, her daughter, you know, isn't locked into this traditional sense of like, this is what a relationship is supposed to be. But frankly, it's the fact that she and Sabine fall in love throughout the book is incidental. I think, as a lot of us have said, it's not the point of the book. It is a part of the book. It's not the point of it. I mean, one thing about giving like that beautiful freedom to just be who you are in a fantasy world, I think is so important for teenagers, because as Kayla said, like the world is real and cruel and mean sometimes. And sometimes it's nice to be like, oh, let me open up this cozy world and I can forget for a second that people do, you know, say things under their breath to me, or they do call me names on purpose to hurt me or misgender me for their own fun. And I think that like, if I can give 4 hours, however long it takes to read a book these days, I don't know, days, weeks, months, I don't know, of kind of freedom from that, then that feels like a gift and like something that like I want to give back to my community in a way.
So I have also some questions that pair books together. I want to first talk about Secrets and Silver in the Mist and the Third Daughter. Secrets are lots of secrets in your books. So I want to know um, if sorry, I'm just reading the question as I speak it. So I won't ask for the spoilers, obviously, for the the reveals and whatnot. But I want to know, how much do you need to know in terms of secrets and sort of the pacing of the secrets, if that makes any sense, before you start drafting? And did sort of reveals that you kind of had in mind before you started drafting change when it actually was on the page or in editing? Um, and yeah, how do you balance keeping secrets like from characters versus readers? Just how do you balance being a keeper of secrets? Um, Adrian, do you want to start?
Yes, this question is going to put me in my place because I'm not as clean of an outliner as I really ought to be for trying to write complicated books, which then bites me in the butt during revisions. Um, so I will say that the evolution of the secrets throughout this book very much, I did not have this all figured out. Not even when I like had the idea, not even when I like sold the idea, not even for the first draft that I wrote. Some of the stuff popped up, like, to be honest, in the first draft a character popped up like 3/4 of the way through who ended up being incredibly important to the duology, so I had to go back and like pepper that person back in more heavily. But I learn a lot as I draft. I learn a lot about my characters and myself, and then I have to go make it all make sense. So I like to think of it as I'm keeping secrets from myself too, and I'm waiting for the right time to figure them out. But no, I will say that I was very intentional once I figured it out. It was unfortunately after the first round of revisions, but once I figured it out, I was very intentional about how to lay the groundwork. Like, I feel like I remember someone saying something that like just because a reader can ultimately predict what you're doing doesn't mean that that's a bad twist. If you've set it up correctly, it's actually proof that you've done it right. And so for me, I think about that a lot, and I want to make sure that I am laying that foundational groundwork to build upon those ideas so that when you get to the end or you get to a reread at the beginning of the book, you're like, oh, I see that now because now I know what's coming, or like how to build that. So I tried to leave breadcrumbs throughout. I tried to drop things so that if you are with me along the way, you get rewarded for it and you don't like come up hungry because I'm just trying to surprise you. Like, once I knew what I was doing, I was very careful to lay it out. But it is hard, especially when you're doing dual POV, when you have one character who knows something, one who doesn't, then the reader knows something that neither of the two of them know. And unfortunately for myself, I did not make it easier in my sequel. So I'm still unwrapping some of that stuff right now. But all that to say, I have actually sorted it all out, and I am very hopeful that the payoff will be worth it for all people involved, including my characters.
Yeah, secrets were a really fun thing to write about in this book. My debut also had secrets, but of course, because this one was full of spies, obviously, I knew I had to up the ante with secrets. I'm actually probably the exact opposite of Adrian Tooley. I'm a pretty meticulous planner. Like, I always have my cue cards and I know exactly what's going to happen in each scene. So I did know basically what everything was going to happen, all the secrets before I started, because I'm just not good at like getting those ideas out when I'm writing. So I am a huge planner. In terms of sprinkling them, though, I really find that like just letting a second person look at it is really helpful to know if like it's go good, if I'm giving enough or I'm not giving too much. So just having a beta reader, or even my agent or my editor, take a look at it and see what they think about it. Think about like the pacing of the reveals and stuff. That's probably what's most helpful to me.
So I write. Yeah, oh, sorry.
sorry.
Were you gonna talk? Oh, I write in a very self-indulgent way. So I'm having a blast when I'm writing. I'm like having the best time. When I am trying to write, I'm just whatever makes the scene most happy for me to write it is what ends up in the scene. And so when I'm building in secrets, it's like, ooh, I'm like, twirling the mustache, like I'm gonna have so much fun with this. And that's basically my process of doing any plotting at all. And so far it's been mostly like 90% fun and it has worked. And then there's that 10% where you're like, no, that does not work in this book. And I have written The Sound of Stars, fine. The Kindred, fine. A Song of Salvation was the one where I was like, I have to approach this an entirely different way. What was I thinking? And so what I ended up doing was writing that first draft. And because I write the way I do, where I write 3 chapters and I figure out what I'm doing, and then I write an outline, but like a very loose one, where it's like 1 sentence per chapter of what I think is going to happen. And then I write the book. It like by the time I'm finished, it's the 4th draft about, because I constantly revise as I'm going. And it's really fun. But because I do that, that's how I build in the secrets as well. Because then I'm like, oh, okay, I need to like start dropping clues here when I'm revising and I'm over here already. It's like I go back to drop the clues. So by the end, it's hopefully in a good place. But then you have the editors who come in and are like, really? And I did not realize how important this was until I was doing I have a murder mystery with Tracy Badua coming out. I don't know what year it is anymore. I like next year, maybe. It's coming out next year, and it is a murder mystery middle grade. And then you're like, whoa, you have to drop clues really from the whole time and like twist and turn. It's been a learning experience. I am in awe at everybody who understands what they're doing, because I have just been playing fast and loose this entire time. And now I realize that there are rules and sometimes you have to abide by them. And it is really blowing my mind.
Oh, sorry. I was actually going to ask you, Kayla. So you go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I didn't. Okay, yeah. So for me, my process is very it is loose, and so I essentially sit down and write myself a story. And with Ravensong and with Neve, she does have this kind of secret at the heart of her identity, the fact that like she is this reincarnated like deific figure. There we go. That was hard. And so there wasn't a lot of like angst with that in particular, but as things kind of progressed and as I realized like where the story was going, it was definitely a lot of backfilling, secrets and foreshadowing and things like that. And even now where I'm going and I'm writing the sequel currently, there's also a lot of, now I'm looking back at like the finished draft of the first book and being just like, okay, here's a little thing that like maybe I hadn't intended to like tie into the current plot, but I'll be like, okay, cool, that's a fun connection I can make. I can do this, I can do that. I've tried to be a little bit more, my dog is leaving. He's decided that's the door opening. He's just like, I'm out. He'll be back in approximately 30 seconds. So I've tried to do really heavy outlines. I feel like every single time I write a book, I write it differently. Because when I want to write something a little bit more complicated in my brain, I go, okay, I need to be a little bit more meticulous about this. But for me, basically the best way I've ever been able to do it is just kind of sitting down and like doing like the excavation method of just kind of figuring it out in the first draft and then going back and filling things in after. So that's been the most successful for me so far. We'll see. It'll probably change.
And speaking of Ravensong, I wanted to ask, because yours, as you've mentioned before, is contemporary fantasy. So I wanted to know, in the contemporary fantasy sort of subgenre, right, how it was for you to interweave fantastical elements and like contemporary elements too, and sort of, right, for this little town to then be like, oh yeah, totally cool that like there are these, deified people just walking around, right? So how did you approach interweaving these, and sort of how do you strike a balance between their contemporary setting and these fantasy elements?
Sure. So the way I have found was really successful to do that was by taking my main character and forcing her to integrate as well. Because like I said, Neve starts out the book with being, she is really, really proud of her like deific heritage. She loves what she is. She loves what she and her sister are, excuse me. And she has a little bit of kind of like 17-year-old contempt for the people around her, and she doesn't like being in high school, and she doesn't have any interest. And so the way I balanced integrating the contemporary part and not just having it just be set dressing was, as the story progresses, as Neve is kind of dragged by her hair into friendship and into these different relationships with the people around her, and like the humans at her high school, and makes these really genuine connections. As she kind of integrates more, the story is also kind of integrates as well. And so, besides obviously like setting it up at the very beginning, but it's a lot of influences from Buffy. It's a lot of like the those like CW dramas. I like you can really tell when you read it that like I grew up on the Vampire Diaries and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's like people have like texted me and just like, yeah, I can tell what you were watching as a kid. I'm like, yeah, you can. I loved it. I wanted to write it. And so it's a lot of, there's some like Deus Ex Machina where it's just like, shouldn't somebody have noticed that? And I'm like, nope. It's like they didn't notice because I say so. And just like what, like I wanted, at the end of the day, I wanted that integration to be fun. I didn't necessarily want it to be the main source of conflict. There's a lot of supernatural conflict, so I didn't want like, because there's always the through line in Vampire Diaries, the CW of like, oh no, like people are gonna find out. And I personally am never really interested in that. Once that happens, I generally kind of am like, oh, I don't care about this anymore. Like I want to keep it like the supernatural fun stuff. And so for me, I kind of maybe like stretched the boundaries of belief to make that happen, but it was fun and I liked it. So nobody told me not to. So that's kind of how I did it.
Yeah, and I also think there's like an element, I think what I like about contemporary fantasy and specifically media that approaches this line is I think that there's also a certain truth to the fact that like inherently we are all kind of self-absorbed in our own lives. And so this idea that like we would be seeing all of these little details about like other people and when they like show up in and out of school and stuff, like it doesn't really feel true to like how I felt growing up and like not knowing when I was supposed to show up at school. I feel like that's the first hurdle. I just wanted to remind people as well, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Alicia, I want to ask you about your books because A Song of Salvation feels when I was reading it, feels very much like these echoes of conversations that you've started, or definitely characters that we've seen in your other books, but also conversations and themes that you've been pulling from your past two books specifically. So I wanted to know how it was for you for A Song of Salvation to really weave all of those elements and the characters back together again, and if this was always your grand plan. That's also what I want to know. Both.
Well, Lily, no, it was not. My approach has been really just doing whatever I want, and then maybe somebody's going to say no, and I've heard a lot of no's. It's worth saying that. The approach with A Song of Salvation was, I think it was smarter than I thought I could be. Is that an answer? Like, I wanted to connect these three books all together. And so I did it, but it was hard. And I wrote The Sound of Stars in a month. I wrote The Kindred in 4. I wrote A Song of Salvation in like 7 months. And that one is the shortest out of the 3. Doesn't make any sense. But it was I had to be really clever, and that's hard with sci-fi because you have to like know stuff. So I had to I read books. I asked for help. I asked Beth Revis to help me. I was like, I want to do a space opera. It's my first time really doing this. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Beth Revis said yes and helped me. I asked Becca Coffindaffer as well, because I just needed to know what the foundation was and how far I could push it and how I could do something different. With The Sound of Stars, it is a contemporary sci-fi. With The Kindred, it is a contemporary sci-fi fantasy. And A Song of Salvation is sci-fi fantasy. It's not contemporary anymore. I've moved past it. So every time I've done a book, it's a different approach, and each one requires a different thought process to it. And with A Song of Salvation, it was really thinking and going back through both of those first two books and making sure that I was consistent and making sure that I was getting it right. And so it changes. It really has changed. And I think that I've evolved as a writer. And I think I've gotten smarter. But when I was starting out, I was just kind of like, and I'm having fun. And now it's like, oh, I can't have that much fun. I have to pull it back. So it's been a different approach. But like, it's been great. I have learned a lot from the process. I'm very proud of the book. I'm using all the things I've learned from it in the next books, and I think I'm like approaching it much better. But wow, was it a lot to learn?
Yeah, and that's a great segue to my next question, which is unexpected challenges and joys while drafting your books. So, yeah, I would love to know if there's anything, an unexpected challenge or joy you had when you were drafting the book. Alicia, do you want to just continue on with that sentiment?
Basically, I sound like Wario. As like that's the only like that's the sound of like wah. That's me. I'm on a floor and I just lay there for a while. Sometimes things come from it. Not always though. I will just be like, what am I doing? I don't know. And then I'll walk around and I'll be like, maybe I'll bake something. Maybe that'll help. And sometimes that helps. With A Song of Salvation, it didn't. So I was like, there's gotta be another way to do this. But it was at the end, it was very joyful when I like turned it in. I was like, goodbye. I was really happy about that. That was the unexpected joy, I guess. The everything else was very like low and making sure I was doing it right. And I was on a panel recently, and I was along with another group of incredible authors, and they were like, and I think about things very well, and I'm very like, I have good intentions, and I do this, and I'm like, I have none of those. I do not know what everybody else is talking about. I am just kind of winging it, and I'm having a great time while doing it. And there's a process, and I think that I can do things well. But like, I don't really struggle with when I was talking about the short story. I don't struggle with imposter syndrome. I don't really all of my insecurities are out by the time I've sat down to write the book. But with The Song of Salvation, it was insecurity the entire time. I was like, I don't know. Really, Wario sound. That was me.
I'm remembering the order. So I think unexpected joys with Ravensong specifically was this book is dedicated to my little sister. I am the oldest of three. I have a little sister and a little brother. The main one, besides the romance, obviously the most important relationship in my characters' lives are her sisters. And so I was like, I want to say like 30-40% between or done with writing the first draft, and one of my characters, Mercy, said something that I heard in my little sister's voice, and that sort of crystallized something for me, and I realized I'm like, oh, okay, I know what this book is about now. And so I got to write the rest of the book with that like clarity of concept, which it was really, really joyful for me. That did not really happen. A lot of times like I'll write the book and then realize what the book is about after. And so figuring it out that early for me was really, really lovely. And then also I love my prose is very, very referential, very chatty. It's very kind of like how I speak. And so just writing that and then writing the high schoolers dialogue, it was so fun. And like it's like that also I the joke that I make is that this book is 300 pages of just me making myself laugh, and I think that's like very like it's just jokes that I think are funny, and if you also think they're funny, fabulous, like thank you. In terms of unexpected hardships, I think that I, as a debut writer I'm writing a duology, my sequel is due very soon, I'm scared, someone hold me, but I made a decent amount of very rookie mistakes going from book 1 to book 2, especially because there were 5 years in between that period. And so an unexpected hardship was how hard kind of transitioning from book 1 to book 2 would be, when, even though I'd been working on it the whole time, I was then like lashed to narrative decisions that I had made in like 2019, which like I still love and I still agree with, but like I was like, I could have set myself up for success a little better. Hoo boy. And so it's just kind of like figuring that out and finding a way to kind of bridge those gaps, and which is why I'm rewriting the sequel for the 3rd time, which is not something I've ever done before and is a horrible nightmare. But it taught me kind of a lot about how to set things up and how to process things, and then also how to just be flexible and be like, okay, this is the situation and this is what it has to work. Like, you're going to do it because you got to do it. And that's just the reality. And so it's taught me a lot, but that's when people talk about like book two syndrome, sequel syndrome, they are not messing around. I thought it was a little bit overblown. I thought it's like, no, we're creatives, we're dramatic. Like, I'd count myself among that. No, it's true. It's awful. But we soldier on.
My answer is totally going to piggyback off Kayla's. I think both my joy and my hardship is the same thing. My first 2 books were standalones. So I was very used to having a world, having characters, everything wrapped it up with a nice little bow at the end. Goodbye, something new. And when I originally pitched The Third Daughter, this was also a standalone. And my absolutely brilliant editor, before she even acquired the book, emailed my agent and was like, I feel like there's more here. Is there more here? And I literally took a step back and I was like, I could have more. And it was like really exciting because it was the first time somebody was like, yes, and to me. And so I had like put together a pitch and like we sold it as a duology, which was so fun. But, then I had to change the way I was thinking about the book because I had always intended it to get its neat little bow. I am so grateful for the extra room because I was able to extend that story, change those character relationships, live in this world longer. And like the first book is very much about like emotions and feelings of sadness. And as I have been, like Kayla, very neat, like head down in sequel land, revision land, rewrite land, I've now gotten to write this duology about feelings. The first book, sadness, the second book, anger. And it's been like a really like beautiful cathartic thing. But it's also been wildly difficult. So I would say the joy of getting to spend more time with characters and a world and like think bigger than I've ever been allowed to before was both a joy and incredibly difficult. But I think we're almost there. I'm supposed to be getting notes from my editor for round 2 revisions like on Monday, so we'll see if we're almost there. But I'm gonna say we're almost there. Send me good vibes.
I feel like a lot of my unexpected challenges come when I'm doing the editing phase. I always feel like my editor will like mention like a plot hole, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's like a pretty small plot hole. I can like fix that up in a couple of paragraphs." But it's like pulling out like a single thing in a Jenga tower. Like, how do you do it without the whole thing coming down? But I also kind of view writing as like a puzzle, and it's just so satisfying when you do like make all your different pieces mesh up. So that's probably my unexpected joy.
Okay, I want to know, where do you find yourself procrastinating the most? I will let people decide if they want to answer it like, do you know, like on what social media do you find yourself procrastinating the most, or just like where in your writing process, just in general, right? Where does one procrastinate? Kayla, do you want to start?
Sure. I was actually just talking about this because I have so much to do in so soon. I can't even joyfully procrastinate anymore, where it's like the thing where you're just doing literally anything else. I do find myself on Twitter a decent amount, or on TikTok a decent amount. I should not be. It's rotting my brain. But I got really, really into hobbies and crafting during the pandemic, and my roommate is a really, really good knitter, I think is the noun for that. And so she taught me very kindly how to knit, and so I've been doing that for a while. And then I actually have them. Hold on, we're gonna have visual aids. So and then last week I was like in full blown panic, and I was just like, you know what I should do? Teach myself how to crochet. And so I've made about 30 of these, and I'm making a blanket. But so yeah, so I do a lot of things with my hands in order to procrastinate. And I will teach myself different things in order to kind of just like be just like I will do anything else. I try when I'm like joyfully procrastinating not to like watch a movie or like watch TV, because then it's a little too tempting to just like hit next episode. That's kind of like the line I try to walk with myself, but it doesn't always work. I also in order to do, I have a lot of like workarounds. Like I have like the cold turkey writer program on my computer that just shuts everything out for a certain amount of time. And I have like the old janky Alpha Smart that I got off of eBay for like $50, which is like really, really nice because I can like just shut my laptop or go work on my porch and just not even have my phone near me, because I will use any opportunity to just like look up anything. I'll just be like, oh, I wonder what type of bird that is. And then I have to ask myself if I took my ADHD medication that day. And it's just like a whole other like, and so, you know, I do procrastinate doing just about everything. It's a wonder I've ever written a book, frankly, because I used to write to procrastinate when I was in school and then in law school. And now it's a job. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that anymore. And it's like, I had to find other ways to do that.
Oh man, I like want to procrastinate, and then the like small voice inside of me that's like, if you miss this deadline, you're a terrible person, pops up, and so then like I'm battling the two of them. But I will say, when I know when I want to procrastinate the most, which is once I have figured out what it is I have to do, then the like toddler inside of me comes out and like throws a fit and is like, but all the brainstorming, like I get an edit letter, like spend like a week or two like figuring it all out, making my charts and my boards and my this, and I'm in it and I'm like, yes, I'm ready to go. And as soon as I know what I have to do, then that's when I have to like go for a walk or something, because like that's when like I start to resist all the fun figuring it out. Yeah, I'm in it. Let's go. Let's have a great time. And then the doing of it, that's where I struggle. I realized the other day that I have like no hobbies, because like reading and writing used to be my hobby and now it is my second job. And so I'm Kayla, I'm like looking at your like little crochet thing. I'm like, interesting. What could I need like to do something? Because like, and like Alicia, I know you bake like gorgeous, beautiful things. So I'm like, okay, what should I do with myself? Because like this is, if I'm going to procrastinate, I need to procrastinate more productively. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, so online, I mostly procrastinate using Reddit because I really love Reddit. In terms of writing, though, it will be fast draft writing. I really love editing, and I really don't like fast draft writing. So it's always like pulling teeth, getting that fast draft out. And as soon as I'm into editing, then I'm good to go.
Yet again, what do I do to procrastinate? I can find a million things to do to procrastinate. I just started, Lily, I think you know, and hopefully others have know as well, is that I started doing a bookies and cookies on Instagram, like once every 2 weeks. And so I chat with an author and they give me a recipe and I make that, and we both have a plate of cookies and we talk about their book for like 30 minutes. And that has been super fun. I was not expecting that. And then I got like 60 authors who are like, yeah, I do it. But like a good fourth of them were not into cooking. So they're like, yeah, you can make up their own recipes. Like, no. All right. No, it's got to be really fun. But that has been a real joy for me. I also do Dreamlight Valley, like for a bit. That helps, I think, get my mind off things. Baking always has helped me with anything. I really appreciate it. I think it's very cathartic. And I, unlike Emily, who views books as a puzzle and that helps, that does not help me. I would be like, I don't want to put the pieces together now. Maybe I give up. But like baking is, I put together, it's a puzzle for me, and I love that. Writing feels like it's an extension of me. I feel very good when I'm writing and I enjoy it so much, but editing in itself is it can be fun, especially when I know what I need to do. But when I don't know what I need to do and I don't have the instant solution that I'm looking for, then I will procrastinate as long as I can until it comes to me. And sometimes it will come to me, and other times I have to start using, like, I have to actually talk to people and figure something out, because then I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And so far I've have a lot of great friends who have been like, okay, here's the problem, and here's the solution, and here are other solutions. And I'm like, that was it the whole time. I've never done anything on my own in that way. Like, I can draft on my own. I can do all of that. But when it comes to revising and editing and all of that, I need people, I need support. And I think that within this community, and you find that, and you find the people who have the same hobbies, who are interested in these same things, it really does help you find your place as a writer. And so I don't need to procrastinate too much anymore. But I do procrastinate anyway, just for the fun of it, because I think there's a lot to be gained from it.
Yeah, and I love, Gayla, what you were saying about joyful procrastination. I feel like so much of procrastination can have a like a connotation to it. And I love what you were saying about joyful procrastination. Like, what can you truly enjoy doing? As Yeah, and I've also started crocheting. And I didn't know that there was like super a thing. I only started learning crocheting like last month, so that's super new. But I've been procrastinating since 2020, and I only say it like that because it's a hashtag on TikTok. I like thought it was going to be a funny thing that I was going to say, like procrastinator or whatever, and I was like, oh my god, there's like a bunch of people who are also also have taken that on. So I love that. The last question I want to ask is, has writing this book taught you anything about yourself or your writing style? That's that's the big question I want to end on. Adrienne, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, okay. Oh, um, this book did teach me a lot about myself. I talked a little bit earlier about how like I ended up centering this duology around like specific emotions, how the first book is sadness, the second book is anger. And I think that much to my therapist's delight, I have finally I'm beginning to learn how to let myself live in those feelings instead of like pushing them aside and moving them away. One of the biggest kind of plot points in this book is Sabine, the apothecary, who accidentally sends Elodie with a vial of her magic tears instead of the sleeping potion. Her sadness is literally magic. Her tears have power. And that was a really important through line for me to carry throughout the book. Is like, I think we're always presented with this idea of an emotional woman is weak, throughout history, even currently, like, that's why women can't be president. Because, but like, you hear this stuff as you grow up of like, if you feel things, you are inherently less than. And I think I internalized a lot of that growing up. And it's taken, a couple years of consistent therapy to realize that I internalized that and repressed that. And so this book and like kind of letting sadness and feelings live front and center, not just as like a part of a character, but almost like why they are, and letting her be powerful because of it and not in spite of that, I think was big for me, like to get to say that like maybe my sadness I can be strong not in spite of it but because of it and with it. And I think that it was just a really nice place for me to get to live for a while. um and so I think that that would be my big like learning takeaway from this particular book.
I think for me, because it was my second book, the takeaway was kind of, that I can do this. Because of course, sometimes with your first book, you're like, is this just going to be a one-off, one book and then no others? But when I got the second one published, it was like, oh yeah, I do got this. Yeah.
I would say that for me, this book it taught me a lot about craft. It taught me all these kind of things. But I think there was, like Adrian, there was a message there where this kind of thought was pervasive, and I didn't realize that it was in my brain so much, was that in order for you to deserve the good things you get, you have to work to the bone. You have to do all of these things. You have to be productive. You cannot stop. You cannot quit. You can't do anything else but focus on this one thing. And the theme of A Song of Salvation is really that existence is enough. And that was like the main theme. I put it at the center, and everything kind of grew from there. And it was a powerful moment for me because I didn't think about it. Like I was just, no, it's not enough. I have to get productive. I have to be this. I've worked my entire life. I've 3 jobs here, 2 jobs there. I've never stopped really. But when I was writing this book, it was like, what would it be like if you told someone who is a reincarnated God that they don't have to do everything? They don't have to save everything. What if they could just exist and be a part of it all instead? And that made a huge difference to me when I was writing it, because it was like, oh, I could also like, wow, I'm teaching this to, the characters who are 17-year-olds or 18-year-olds, and I didn't learn this myself. And so it was a really cool moment where I realized that just being able to sit and write is huge. Just being able to sit and stare at nothing is a gift. And I can just live with that. I can deserve that goodness. I don't have to like break myself to do it.
So I think, like Alicia and like Adrian, it's a very emotional book. Ravensong is, and instead of sadness, it's Neve's defining feature is her rage. It is literally like kind of where she gets her power from. And for me, I was really kind of wanting to write a book where an angry character is not necessarily like angry at the world or like angry at anything in particular, and but just still kind of feels that. Because I remember how I was when I was that young. I had plenty to be mad at, but it felt like there was a little bit something else. And I wanted to kind of express that sometimes it's okay to feel that, and also that can be what saves you. And I think that was really, really important for me. And that's sort of, I kind of like unpacked that for myself. Obviously the sisterhood element is really, really important. I think I wrote this in a special edition, but I forgot to write a letter. But like, you can probably tell by like the everything about me. But like I said, I am the oldest of my siblings, and that is like a defining feature of me and like how I exist in this world. And so, really getting to like unpack that was really really kind of wonderful, because I got to express the way that my relationship, especially with my sister, but siblings in general, like nobody is gonna like make you, no one can hurt you like them, but also like nobody's gonna love you like they do. And finding like and just kind of exploring that relationship was really, really lovely. And then I think the last thing was, I learned that there was a little bit of wish fulfillment for me, where the way I wrote Neve and her friends, specifically, Neve, like I said, is very much dragged into friendship by her hair. She's so cranky about it the whole time, and then obviously it changes her whole perspective. She's so lucky and grateful, and I wrote maybe an experience that I like was kind of like longing for like high school aged me, that like I have now in my 20s kind of built for myself. And for me, that was like really lovely to kind of put that in for like the younger people. They're just be like, if you don't have this yet, like it exists and you might have to make it, but it is there. And yeah, that was all kind of stuff I was like unpacking and learning and as I was writing. Also, how to use commas correctly. That too. I still don't. I just willy-nilly with abandon. My copy editor is a saint, genuinely.
I'm so glad we ended on that question. It gave me so many good feels. Thank you everyone for the panel. I also dropped, not dropped. I put in the description box below the link to everyone's books. So definitely pick them up, pre-order them, add them to your TBR, do all of the amazing things. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you to my amazing panelists for chatting about queer sci-fi fantasy. And I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.